please sign this invoice or this work order stating that we've done the job. Would you mind leaving a review? And they're just standing there watching you like, sure. Or no.
This is the Service Business Mastery Podcast with Tersh Blissett. I'm Bryan Orr, and I get to co-host this episode. And today on the podcast, we talk about reviews, getting reviews, and mostly what to do when you get bad reviews. So today we're talking about online reviews, right?
That's correct.
So before we get started into the specificity about online reviews, do you think they're important in the first place? Do they really matter?
Oh, yes, absolutely. If you want to grow, if you want people to call you, and depends on what you want people to think about you before you get out there.
So what about the guys who are like, I don't need a website. It's all word of mouth for me. I don't need any of that online marketing stuff.
That's a really touchy subject because, in my opinion, your new customers that you get, we're in the technological age, so they're going to check online. I would say that you have to have it. It's a no-brainer. If you're listening to this podcast, you have to have it, because if you're that guy, you're not listening to this podcast.
And I think both you and I are similar in that when I started my business, I really built it on a combination of word of mouth, existing relationships that I had, plus a heavy dose of doing things online. And when I started the business in 2005, that was pretty new. I was using AdWords within like 6 months of launching Kalos, and that was unheard of. And I made a lot of mistakes in that process. So I'm not like a huge, you have to be on AdWords advocate or anything. But I definitely learned that there's a lot of power in having a website, doing it properly, and then also when social came around, a lot of the things you can do with that. And of course, this episode is not about the power of the internet or of social media. Social marketing is a whole nother thing. But I would agree with you that having a presence online is critical for any business. But when you have a new business or a small business that's just starting out, or if you want to grow your business, it's one of the best places that you can be, in addition to going out and shaking hands and kissing babies.
Yeah, don't pat babies' heads.
Is that bad?
I don't think it's good. They have a soft spot.
That is true. What you definitely don't want to do is you definitely don't want to kiss hands and shake babies.
That's definitely bad. You and I have spoken in the past about Michael Stelzner and social media reviews a little bit, not a whole lot. I do have some questions for you, a couple different things. I have a list here. Number one, respond no matter what. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think about responding to a review, whether it's good or bad, and a timeliness of the response?
Okay, let's flip this question around. I mean, why wouldn't you respond?
Maybe you're too busy. That would be my biggest excuse that I would give if I wasn't going to respond to something.
But that would be an excuse, right? What other possible reasons could it be? Could it be that you're afraid of your own emotions in it, that you're going to get into back and forth with them, a negative conversation? I mean, what would be the possible reasons not to respond? I can't think of any.
I don't think of a good one if you can't control your emotions. That was one of the things that you and I spoke about at the beginning of this year whenever we talked on the HVAC School podcast, was about being a business owner and starting your own business. And we mentioned that if you were the type of person that you couldn't take constructive criticism, it may not be the best thing for you to do. I kind of feel like that kind of goes into this. You may want someone else controlling your social media or your review process if you're that person.
Well, it's also that constructive criticism is one thing, but in a lot of cases with negative reviews, so this is kind of the broader question of, reviews, is it valuable, so on and so forth. But if you open yourself up to reviews, then you're going to get some bad ones sometimes. And we have very few bad reviews, but we had one just recently, and so I can kind of refer to that one. And I always respond immediately, and I respond generally with, I'd love to talk to you about this more. And I don't do that online first. Usually I'll pick up the phone if I know who they are. I mean, I'm immediately going to call them and say, well, what happened? How can we help? In some cases, you already know what happened. And so if you already know what happened, because, there are cases where you got a little bit of crazy on your hands, and that happens, right? So there's the two different categories. There's the one like I had the other day where I had no clue that this happened. This was a longtime customer. We always had a good relationship with them. They were a little on the challenging side at times, but we always had a good relationship, and they were a player in the community, and we got this 1-star review, and I was like, holy cow, what's going on? And it turned out that there was just a very clear misunderstanding between one of our CSRs and this person, and really neither end did anything wrong per se. They just totally misunderstood one another. And so we got it resolved, and that was no problem. They took it down, ended up changing it to a 5-star review. So, and that's happened maybe 5, 6 times where we've had something that started off as a 1 and then ended up being a 5 just through communication. Because there are some people who just jump online and leave a bad review. So I would never respond publicly to that right away. I would always talk to the person if I can first.
What happens if you do not know this person? I've had people leave a review on our page, and I was pretty sure I knew exactly who it was, but they didn't put down their actual name. They created a new Google account to leave the review. I mean, it wasn't a 1-star, it was a 3-star, but I'm still pretty sure who did it, but I didn't want to just reach out to them. What would you do in that situation?
Well, in a situation if you legitimately don't know who it was, which is very rare, but if you don't, then that's what you reply with. You say, I'm really sorry that you had less than an ideal experience. That's not what we want you to have with our company. I'm not exactly sure who you are or what you experienced, but I would like to deal with it thoroughly. So if you could give me a call, here's my phone number, here's my email. You maybe even put your cell phone number down. Obviously, you're putting that on the internet, so maybe you don't want to do that, but that's what I do. And so that way people can see that someone left a review without you even knowing who they were. And in a lot of cases, they will call you and then you can resolve it. I think that's maybe happened once to me.
Did they actually call you?
Yep. My memory of it isn't perfect, but yeah, a few years ago, we had a circumstance like that where I really didn't know who it was. You'll get some reviews that are literally just 3 stars. We have one right now that's from a competitor of ours. Literally, the guy used his own account and he just gave us 3 stars. And so on that one, I just replied publicly, interesting, ...
Thank you, Bob. Bob's Heating and Air.
Yeah, that's very appropriate. That happens sometimes. That's life. You'll get people who leave bad reviews even when they have no experience with you. There was one case that I had somebody leave a review where it was like, we've heard this and we've heard that about Kalos. And it was all lies, extreme stuff too. Like you take advantage of the elderly. And clearly it was somebody who is a competitor or a friend of a competitor or something just trolling us. So in that case, I actually made a complaint to Google and I said, this is not legitimate. And then I responded to it in that way, just like, I don't know who you are, but I would love to talk to you, but it doesn't appear that you've done any business with us because that's not how we do business, sort of a thing. Not in a defensive way, but just in a like, I don't know where you're coming from here. And then the Google actually took it down.
Oh, okay. That's going to be my next question. Did Google actually take it down?
Because that's against their terms of service. Their terms of service state that you need to be someone who has an experience with your business.
I've gone through that process before where we had a customer who did something similar. It was a weird situation where we had in the air conditioning side, we just blew him away with customer service. And he went on to all the platforms and gave us a 5-star review. And then the plumbers weren't able to make it out there one Friday evening. And he went back to Google and changed the 5-star to 1-star because we didn't come out there that Friday. And I was like, oh my goodness, what do you do in that situation? There ain't nothing really you can do with that because he was a legitimate customer. So you can't go to Google and complain about that type of situation.
No, there's nothing to do. If you have someone who legitimately worked with you, it doesn't matter if their complaint is crazy or not. There's no rule in Google's terms of service against them being crazy. But there is rules against, because there are cases, you'll see this in some of these nutso Facebook groups where people will abuse certain businesses because they've made them mad on social media. Well, yeah, I mean, that's crazy town. I mean, Google will go and clean a lot of that up if you can prove that that's what happened. I mean, my experience of them has been largely pretty good, especially with Google. But in a case where we had a case like that too, where a customer gave us a 5-star and they turned it to a 1, and I just called them and just said, I'm sorry about your experience here. What can we do? And in that case, that was another case where they went back and changed it back to 5. You just have some people who that's how they live their life. They just react. They're just back and forth, pendulum swinging from one to the other, and you just have to deal with that.
And that type of emotion is not the type of emotion you want to exhume. That's not the type of emotion that you want to put out there whenever you're replying to that message either. We got one this morning because I have all of the messages sent straight to my phone through Google's app. And so it dinged me about 6 o'clock this morning and said that we had a review. And I went on there and it was a guy over the weekend, went out and he got a 5-star review, which was great. It's always nice to get those, especially first thing in the morning, you wake up and you get it. That's a great way to start the morning, or a really bad way to start the morning if it was a 1-star review.
Well, you make a good point about the weekend service. You'd be shocked what percentage of our glowing 5-star reviews come from weekend and after-hour service. As a technician, I'm not somebody who's a big fan of weekend and after-hour service. I never have been. In fact, when I started my company, I intentionally decided not to advertise 24-hour service because I didn't want people waiting and calling us at all hours. But it is shocking how much of the good reviews we get do come from after-hour service. And I'm not saying one side or the other on that, but it is incredible how often that does happen.
Yeah, your technicians can really set that up. They can set you up to win or fail in that situation. I remember listening to the podcast that you did a while back on the HVAC school about after hours, being on-call technician.
Oh, less for.
That was a great one. And y'all made great points about the service technicians. They could put people off, or they can make them feel guilty about calling you out there. And that's not going to be the person that's going to give you a 5-star review.
No.
Do you give any kind of spiff program or anything to your guys if they get a 5-star, or have you heard of people doing that?
It's a good idea. I haven't actually heard of anyone doing it, and we don't do it. It's interesting why, because at my previous employer, I made a killing on getting attaboys. But I was such a little brown noser.
That's not your personality type. I can't see that.
I see what you're doing here. Yeah, I see what you're doing. Okay, so I'm a little bit of a brown noser by nature. And I was very young too, so I felt like I was behind the 8 ball all the time, and I always had to prove myself. So what I would always do when people would offer me a tip, I would say, no, I can't accept it. But if you want to do something that would help me with my career, if you wouldn't mind calling one of my managers and letting them know that I did a great job, that would do much more for me than a tip.
That's cool. In reality, it probably will if you got a $5 raise over the period of a couple of years versus that $5 that they gave you.
That's just a technique that I use. So I think because I'm such a brown noser, I was always kind of like, I didn't want to incentivize positive reviews too much because I didn't want guys asking for it, because there's a fine line. Maybe you do this, but there are a lot of systems out there where you ask for a review right before you leave. And that is a really, really fine line with me, because it's like when you go to a restaurant and they ask for your review, or when you get off the line with somebody who's a telemarketer about phone support, and they ask for your review, 3-question review when you're done. That's always so annoying. Like, I want to leave a review if I'm actually happy with the service. I don't want to waste time doing it on every single service provider. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. We did use a program that way. It wasn't one of those the technician would do before we left. It was more of a happy call follow-up type thing, where we'd send it out after the technician had already, all the service had been completed, basically requesting feedback. We really, truly wanted the feedback, but if the feedback was one way or the other, they could give a 5-star or a 1-star, hopefully a 5-star review on Google or any of the other social media platforms. But with that being said, Yelp is really strict about doing things like that. In their guidelines, they make it to a point that you have to follow certain rules for requesting reviews for Yelp. Just an FYI out there, if anybody tries to do anything.
For sure. Like we have like a zillion Yelp reviews and only 5 of them actually show. And a lot of it has to do with, if you're the first review that they've ever left on Yelp, the odds that it's going to show up are very slim. Mm-hmm. So generally, Yelp wants their active users to be the ones who are leaving the reviews. They want them to be very organic, which changes very area to area. You have some areas that are huge Yelp areas and other areas that aren't. But what I would say is, what we do is we do a follow-up call with every customer, usually the following day. And we just say, did everything go okay? Do you have any questions? Did the technician take care of all your needs? Just very simple conversational, not a list of questions. Just following up and just checking on you, making sure everything's all right and everything's still running good. And if the customer says, yeah, everything's great, you just say, okay, so would you say that overall your experience was a good one? Yeah, no, it was excellent. Okay, if you wouldn't mind, we do have an email we can send you with some links of places that you can leave notes about your experience publicly. If you are interested in doing that, then great. If not, that's fine as well. And then we send them the links. If they say they had a bad experience or they have a problem, then we just figure out what it takes to fix the problem. We send a technician, and then we ask for it later once we've actually satisfied them. Because I think some of the senses that people get are like, well, you got to get it honest one way or another, 5-star or 1-star. Well, yeah, I'm looking for an honest review for sure, but I don't want somebody leaving me a review when they're still unhappy. I would rather have a chance to make them happy before I ask for the review. And it's just got to be low pressure. And that's why I like the email way, is because they can do it in their own time. If it's a priority to them, then they'll do it. If it's not, then they won't. And either way is fine.
I feel like if you have a technician, service tech, or installer that they're doing their end of the day procedures, they started up the system, showed the homeowner how to operate a thermostat, how quiet the outdoor unit is or how loud it is, depending on your brand. Then they have their tablet in their hand. They're like, okay, please sign this invoice or this work order stating that we've done the job. Would you mind leaving a review? And they're just standing there watching you like, sure. Or no, not right now. So that's an awkward situation.
Well, yeah, because saying no like that, it's like you're forcing them to be negative.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Because I would say no in a lot of those cases, even if I wanted to, just because I hate being told what to do. And I feel like I'm being pressured. This comes back to me having severe authority issues, and I probably need to have counseling.
I was going to control issues there.
Yeah, control issues is probably what it is. Yeah, you're learning more and more about me. Brown noser and controlling.
There you go. So one quick thing, though, you don't have a script at all?
Yeah, we have a guideline. It's like a bullet point list. And actually, I wrote it years ago, and then I handed it over to my lead CSR, and she's kind of tweaked it over the years. We also record all of our phone calls, so it's handy as well because I can go back and listen to them. And I do that on occasion just to kind of see how she's sounding. But she tries to keep it. So she is working off of something that I wrote a long time ago. I'm really big on not just saying the exact same words every time because that can lead to you sounding like a robot, right?
Yeah. Pretty much we've gotten a lot of these numbers done, but I want to reiterate a few things. The being patient and understanding whenever we're doing or replying to a review on any kind of section, social media or Google. And then if it is a bad review, apologizing, basically putting yourself in the customer's shoes. Next is contacting the customer privately. You said that you actually reach out and call them. Some people will message them and say, send them go straight to private messaging versus picking up the phone and calling them. And then a lot of times I find that people who do that, they'll communicate private message wise. They will go back and change the review to a 5-star because you've actually done it privately rather than going publicly and just airing out all the dirty laundry, so to say.
Okay, so when I say pick up the phone, that comes from the fact that I am the opposite of someone who likes to talk on the phone. I despise speaking on the phone, which is weird because I like being on a podcast, which is really odd. Maybe I just like hearing my own voice. I don't like to have to hear other people talk. And speaking of that, why are you even here, Tersh? You're bothering me. No, I'm just kidding. Right. Yeah. So I don't like picking up the phone. I never have in business. I've always preferred email. My dad makes fun of me, just like, oh, you're Mr. Email. But what I've learned is that you can communicate certain things in the tone of your voice that you can never communicate over an email. There's like a sincerity that people can pick up on. And so some people are going to feel threatened by you calling them and they're not going to want to pick up the phone, but that's an opportunity to leave a message that has that empathy in your voice. To say, I got your review. I'm really sorry about what's gone on. I would like a chance to make it right if at all possible. If you can give me a call back, this is my personal cell phone number and I'm going to handle it personally. Here we go. And give them the cell phone number. That to me just goes a long way if your intent is to really resolve it, which I think it should be. Again, this response is not just for you to show other people publicly that they're wrong and you're right. I mean, that's not even how it works. I have a competitor in town, that's what he always does. When someone leaves a bad review, he just starts getting into a match with them in his responses, and it just escalates. That should never be your intention.
You want to stay away from doing that on private message also, or the phone call. Don't call them and get into an argument with them over the phone. I wouldn't think that anybody would intentionally do that. That's not their goal, to pick up the phone and start screaming at a customer that you just left me a 5-star review, so you're going to ruin my reputation in town. Another thing is not leaving your cell phone on Google or discount. Say, okay, well, the next time you come in, we'll give you a free maintenance or whatever. That helps whenever you're doing that via private message or a phone call versus on the actual thread itself.
I'm going to read a bad review. How does that sound? Would that be interesting to anybody? I like specificity in podcasts.
Only if it's your bad review.
No, it's one for you. No, it's the most recent bad review that somebody left for me. And what's weird is that I did respond to this, and it's not showing the response for some reason. And I'm not sure why. So this is sort of a bad thing, but I know exactly what I said. Maybe I just said it offline, and then I forgot to ever put it online, which is bad because you should put it online too. And it's just so you know, this is 1 out of 45 stars. This is a 2-star. Kalo Services installed my heating and AC system for $5,000 a few years ago. I have had them come out to clean the units 3 times since then. The first 2 times, they did a thorough job of it, taking apart the inside units and cleaning key parts of it. The cost went up $20 the second time, which I was fine with. But this year, the price practically doubled, and the technicians said they don't take the units apart anymore. They claimed they were losing money, so they had to double their price. I would probably not mind all this, except unlike the last 2 cleanings, we didn't see any difference in the unit's performance this time. $150 for not much. Oh well, so much for staying loyal to a business. Now, this is a very, very loaded review. There's a lot of misunderstanding in this review. And based on my understanding of what happened here, it's fairly intentional. He knows the full story, but he's only kind of putting out his version of it. But my response to him was, there were some changes in our pricing structure. It is true that our previous maintenance fees we found were unprofitable for us, so we did adjust them. But if you saw any decrease in the quality of service that we've provided to you, I want to personally handle this. So please call me on my cell. I'd be happy to deal with it. Here's my cell phone number. And he never contacted us back. I even had my service manager reach out to him, and he was never able to get it resolved. So in this particular case, you're going to sometimes have people where it's really pricing related. And what I always tell my people is a bad review that's related to pricing only, or someone just doesn't like your prices, or they don't like that they've increased or changed. That's a review that you're going to have to live with as a business owner, because that happens, especially when you're small. A lot of us, when we're small and new, we don't charge enough. And so we get customers who are addicted to our extremely low pricing. And then when you have to change, they get angry and they post things like this. And I don't have a real good solution to that. But I would never fight back. I would never say, well, that's not true. That's not what happened. Because in this case, what he's saying is we're not doing as much for the same money. No, we are doing as much as long as you pay the new fee. So it's more expensive now for us to take it all apart like we used to. If you want a basic maintenance, it's the same price as it used to be. We just do less than we used to for the same price. And so he's just kind of convoluting two things.
I seen in a post on Facebook the other day where one of the guys in the group is still charging the same price as he was 22 years ago to some of his customers, or 20 years ago. If they originally got a maintenance for whatever the price is, he never went up on the price for that customer. But then as he started new customers, he would give them the new prices. Because as a small business owner, it's almost terrifying to go up on prices when people are used to your normal prices. New customers, it's easy to say, oh yeah, our maintenance is $75 per visit now. And then your older customers, you're like, oh, it's $55 a visit. And you just keep going back for $55. It's because you're afraid that they're going to go somewhere else. Well, what you're doing is you're paying them to come fix their air conditioning, or that service their air conditioning or water heater or whatever.
Yeah, and that's something that I had to, this is a whole different conversation about pricing, but that's something that I had to deal with, where I had to just realize that, because I used to say this, like probably 3 years ago, I used to say, we don't have unhappy customers. Because if someone's unhappy, we'll do whatever it takes to make them happy. And it's just such an ignoramus. Like, what's wrong with me? It's all these problems that I have. I definitely need counseling. But what I've realized is that, yes, I do want to make people happy, but I can't lose money. I'll lose money happily if we make a mistake. And if we make an error, well, then I'll lose money hand over fist in order to make it right. But I'm not going to lose money just because I don't want to change my processes, or because I don't want to make somebody cranky about my pricing. They wouldn't stay in business not making money doing what they're doing. And regardless, they're not going to believe you're just lining your big rich pockets as an owner. But everybody listening to this, I shouldn't say everybody. I'm sure there's some technicians out there who believe that their owners are lining their big, rich, fat pockets. But those of you who run a business or who manage a business, you know that that's not the case. You just have to make these decisions. And sometimes that results in, like this case, a 2-star review that I would rather not have. But I think we came by it honest. And I gave a good shot for us to resolve it, and it didn't happen. So
you can ask a customer to remove a post. If they don't change it, I would ask them to change it back to a 5-star like you've done. And we've seen customers do it. But in some social media platforms, you, as the admin of the page, can actually remove the post. But that's a no-brainer. I wouldn't do that. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I wouldn't. The only time I would do it is if I thought it was trolling or I thought it was ingenuous. Like I thought someone was being abusive just for the sake of being abusive, then I would if I could. But something like this one right here, absolutely not. I would leave this up if this was on a place that I could remove it. I'm trying to think, what are the places you can remove it? Can you remove Facebook maybe?
Yeah, you can take your reviews off of Facebook altogether.
Oh, right. No, I wouldn't do that. I mean, if you have so many bad reviews that you're tempted to take your reviews completely off, I think you have other issues in your business. So no, people need to have a voice, and you need to learn from it. I mean, if I was getting this type of review every other day, well, I would need to look at it and say, is this working for me? Was this price change a wise idea? But this is one out of thousands of service calls that we've done. And so in that case, I take it with a grain of salt and attempt to learn from it and attempt to resolve the relationship if at all possible. But no, I definitely wouldn't delete reviews. That's a really bad precedent.
I agree. Your thoughts on letting other people in the community reply to some reviews? I've seen this recently in a few of our friends' air conditioning companies, or the community has gotten back behind him or them to just say, well, we haven't experienced the same exact thing as what you're describing. What you're describing is way out in left field compared to what we've experienced. And then they had 10 or 12 other people do the exact same thing. And so what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that the customers will see that as a business owner reaching out to family members and friends to get on there and do that? Or do you think that it comes across as actual genuine?
I think it could be either. It really just depends. If somebody was a fan of my business and they were attacking somebody else, then I would delete their attack.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I would say, well, I think you're a liar, I saw this recently with a business that I'm a big fan of, a roofing company that I use. A customer made a claim on social media and it just kind of went viral and people were just going back and forth and attacking each other. And that's a really negative thing. I mean, negativity breeds negativity no matter which direction it's coming from. So I would always say, if somebody is attacking, I would delete, and then I would just tell them, look, we want to be civil. We're going to do this civilly. And even if somebody is a little on the crazy side, which you'll run into that sometimes. I mean, we're dealing with it. We're dealing with it right now. We have a customer that we refuse service to because they create less than ideal living conditions for their tenants, and they're expecting us to do some things that are
slumlords.
Yeah, that's the term that we're looking for. And so we're not going to continue doing business in these types of conditions. And they are trying to say that it's because of racism or something. And so, I mean, what can you do in those circumstances? All you can do is just say, well, no, that's not why. It's got nothing to do with it.
It's because we constantly tell you that you have to change the evap.
In this case, it's electrical. And so it's actual safety. It's like people are going to die if you don't.
Exactly.
It's not just an opinion. It's like any sane person would look at this and say, this is not okay. And we don't want to have our name behind anything to do with this anymore. And that's what occurred there. So it's so cut and dry. I could tell you the whole story, and that would be super boring. But there's things like that that happen at times where you don't do what people want you to do, and they get angry with you. And so they kind of go on the warpath. And I think it's good if your community can come around and say, no, that's not what's going on here. They're just trying to run a good business, and that's it. I think it's really good if you can have a community of people that help support you, but I would never allow it to get negative or to get attacking or divisive, if at all possible.
Agreed. Last thing is, when do you ban somebody from your page?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as somebody's going too far, they're not stopping. It's just troll-like behavior. People are baiting, and they're looking to be harmful to you. It's one thing to have feedback that's good and helps, because again, if there's people out there who provide bad service, then it's important that the public knows that they provide bad service. That's fair. But when you go on this like warpath to try to destroy somebody, that's not healthy. It's not good. And I'm not going to do that to somebody else, and I'm not going to allow somebody to do that to me. Ultimately, I'm not going to allow them to hurt the livelihood of my employees and all the people who depend on my business because they're just a little emotionally unstable.
Little trolls.
And it's getting worse and worse. There are going to be cases. I've thought about this a lot with HVAC school when I have people in my groups and things, some of them who really don't like me because I delete their stuff or take them down or block them from my groups. And it's going to happen someday where one of them is going to go off and try to attack my business. And when they do, they're going to be sorry that they did that. And I'm not going to be aggressive or nasty. I'm not going to call them names, but I'm going to pursue people who do that sort of thing to the full extent of the law, which it sounds like I'm threatening their life. I'm not saying that. I'm saying with lawyers and notices and all that sort of thing, that it's going to be very inconvenient for them because that sort of thing is really harmful. And when people kind of take it to that level where it becomes a personal attack, that's where you really have to draw the line. But as a business owner, understand that almost never happens as long as you do your part. I mean, I have thousands of customers. I've been in business 12 years. I have 60 employees, and I've never had to get to that point with anybody. In construction side, we had a subcontractor who's gone a little crazy, and that's been pretty negative. But that's really the only case in the history of Kalos that has really gotten extreme and had to get lawyers involved.
And there are laws that will protect the owners or the business themselves. So lawyers can take care of those type of situations if they're false, especially on social media, Google, that type of stuff. They can take care of a lot of the negative things if it's not true.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if it is true, then you need to deal with it. I mean, you need to make it right. We've got a case right now with the customer. We did everything we were supposed to do, but she's just not happy because she misunderstood how a product works. And she claims that we didn't instruct her properly, and we'll probably end up just giving her all of her money back. And that happens sometimes in business. Sometimes that's just the price you have to pay for keeping the peace, is just giving people their money back.
Do you take the equipment back?
In that case, I'm not going to, just because it would leave a hole in the wall and other things that then we have to deal with. So, and that's why it may not happen, because, this is interesting. I'm not going to go any further than that, because you run into situations sometimes where it's just best to just give people their money back. And sometimes it's a lot of money. I mean, in this case, it's like $4,500 for a full installation. You have to do the right thing. You always have to do the right thing as a business owner. That makes your life so much easier and lets you sleep so much better if you just do the right thing and do what you know is the right thing. And if somebody is going nutso, then just respond to them calmly and pleasantly as you possibly can. And ultimately, sometimes you have to draw the line. But generally speaking, as long as you let them know that you actually do care about them. That's what people react to with businesses more than anything else negatively, is they react to this feeling that the business doesn't care, that they're just standing on their policies and they're not going to do the right thing. They're not going to address the problem. And especially as an owner or a manager, you have a real opportunity to step in the gap and make that happen, fix those problems before they get out of hand.
A lot of people find that that's the benefit of the small company, and that's a lot of times the reason why people will want to do business with a quote-unquote small company versus a large company. And some companies will be perceived as a large company when they're actually a small company just because of their online presence. By acting like the small company when it comes to situations like this will really help grow your customer base.
That's your job, right? I mean, as a manager, as an owner of a business, sometimes you just need to step in and do it. I have a service manager who's great, but sometimes I'm the one who needs to handle it. This recent one that we had got that 1-star review from a longtime customer who I knew personally, I didn't call my service manager. I just called her myself and said, hey, what's going on? This is something I want to take care of for you. And we made it right. And that's a big part of what your job is we're in the business of fixing things. And again, this isn't just air conditioning. This is every business out there. We're in the business of fixing things and making money, but we're really in the people business. You have to fix people first. When people are broken, that needs to be your focus until that's solved before you move on to the next job or the next thing. And it's easy to get worked up, especially when you're new. I was telling my wife the other day when it was just me and one other guy and every dollar counted. I remember every tank of refrigerant we would buy was a decision. And that was back when refrigerant cost $50 a tank. And it was like, oh, man, should I buy a tank of refrigerant now or should I wait? Do I want another tank in my truck? Whereas now we'll buy the pallets. And at that early time, when a customer had a bad review or a bad experience, I remember just getting so emotional. It was so emotionally impacting to me. Because of that emotion, I would sometimes respond incorrectly. I remember a guy who I fired. He was essentially calling me a liar, but I didn't need to fire him. All I needed to do was just make it right and deal with it. But he was being more aggressive than he needed to be. And I just kind of hung up on him and said, I don't want to work for you anymore. And that today, I would never do that because it's not, you realize in business that this is just part of the job. And you have to embrace it and you have to stay calm and you're going to have good days. You're going to have bad days. You're going to get 5-star reviews for every 1-star review if you're a decent company. And so just focus on the good and work to resolve the bad.
Are you familiar with the Google's overlooking through social media as far as reviews? I've read and listened to several experts in the industry speak on the topic of Google is now reaching out to social media to look for the reviews, anything that's linked back to the same company.
I've heard that. I've seen in some posts where it'll actually aggregate social reviews as well, which is a shame if they're aggregating. And so I don't have the yes or no answer to that, but to me, it's a shame if they're aggregating Facebook because Facebook is so low bar. I mean, literally anybody can go give you a 2-star review. And I get a lot of those. Like on Facebook, they just go click 2 stars and that's it. And you look them up and they live in like Morocco or something. That shouldn't count. Clearly, you just have somebody who's maybe they saw an ad and they didn't like it. So they click 2 stars. And that's unfortunate if that does happen in that regard. Because we've seen our best luck with Google itself, with the actual Google small business, Google business reviews. That's where we've had our biggest success with getting reviews.
You said that Yelp's pretty popular around your area?
What seems to be the case with Yelp is people use Yelp in areas where there's a lot of like restaurants and stuff. So if you're in a fairly urban area, it seems like Yelp is popular because they're reviewing restaurants and they kind of have a nightlife scene. That's how Yelp got started. And so if you've got none of that, I would be surprised if Yelp is active, but who knows? I'm by no means an expert on Yelp. Yelp is just a lot more challenging too to get reviews on. And because we've had customers who just of their own accord would leave us a review on Yelp, but we were the first review they left. And even that, it seems that like Yelp blocks them half the time. You need an active Yelp community where you are, and that's really the main factor more than anything else. And so it really just depends. When you get closer to Orlando, kind of the big urban center of our area, then there's more of that. And where we are, which tends to be more suburban, there's less.
How far away from Orlando are y'all?
We're about 35 miles away, 35 miles west. So we're definitely a suburb of Orlando.
Downtown Savannah, I feel like there's a lot of Yelp going on activity, but we don't get a ton of activity air conditioning wise and plumbing wise as far as customers leaving reviews or even having downtown Savannah. We do work there, but we also do out in the suburbs also. But we don't have a large Yelp following as far as in the service industries.
Well, I think it just depends on whether or not there's different types of Yelp markets. There's Yelp markets where most of the Yelpers are people who are coming in from other areas. There's a lot of people who come into Savannah, visit Savannah. And Orlando is the same way. But it really, I think, mostly depends on what is your native population who uses Yelp. Do you have a native population who are really into that sort of thing, going out to restaurants and reviewing restaurants and all that? So I imagine if you were in New York or San Francisco, cities like that, I'm sure or LA, there would probably be a huge or more benefit to something like Yelp. Whereas, again, I'm really hypothesizing because I don't live in any of those places. But my experience has been that Google reviews are king. And I really don't focus much effort on anything other than Google.
Same here. I'm right there with you. That pretty much wraps up all of my questions that I have for you. Do you have any questions to add to that?
No, I think that's it. Get good reviews because you're good at your job. That's the main thing. Be good to people. Treat people with kindness and fix things good. You'll get good reviews.
Be gooder than everybody else.
Yeah, be more gooder.
Well, we appreciate you listening to the podcast. You've stuck around all the way to the end. As Bryan says, I don't have any dad jokes like Bryan usually does. If you like this podcast, please subscribe on iTunes or any of your Android devices, Google Play Store. Follow our Facebook page, join our Facebook group. If you have any questions, that's pretty much the best place to find us and ask the questions and get a pretty instant response most of the time. We hope you listen to all the rest of the podcasts, our other groups, everybody part of the Blue Collar Roots Network.
Blue Collar Roots, yes. The Tool Pros podcast with Brent Ridley and Billy Noth, the HVAC School podcast, the Tradesman with Zach Ciota, the Building HVAC Science podcast with Bill Spohn, and I can't forget the HVAC Shop Talk podcast with Zach Ciota, and my good buddy, the Chosen One, as we refer to him, Ralph Wolf. So those are all the different podcasts. You can find all of those and all the different, we call them pod catchers, any of the places that you find all of your fine, high quality, glimmering, shiny podcasts. All right, thanks for listening. We will talk at you next time on Service Business Mastery.